never thought my life would be so strange at 72. I was just an ordinary widow, left alone with a quiet house and more time than I knew what to do with. After Tom died, the days felt endless. People said I'd get used to the loneliness, but years went by and the silence still crept in. And that's when he came into my life. Charlie, my dog, my comfort, my companion, and as things would turn out, something more. It started out like any pet-owner relationship. Charlie was a sweet mutt I adopted from the shelter after my daughter Sarah practically begged me to get a dog. "It'll keep you company, Mum," she said, not knowing the company I'd end up keeping. At first, Charlie was just a dog, albeit a particularly alert one. He seemed to know when I was feeling down, nudging my hand with his cold nose and wagging his tail to lift my spirits. I talked to him a lot, and I suppose that was normal. After all, who wouldn't talk to a dog when there's nobody else around? But things between us slowly developed into something deeper, something I couldn't have imagined. I still remember the night when I first felt something shift. I was sitting on the couch, lost in thought about Tom. It was the anniversary of his death and I was tired of crying. Charlie was by my side, as usual, but this time he didn't just sit there. He had crawled onto the sofa and laid his head on my lap, his eyes locked with mine, as if he could feel the weight of my grief, as if he understood. "You're a good boy, Charlie," I whispered, absent-mindedly stroking his soft ears. I could feel my grief easing just by being with him. I remember thinking that he understood me better than anyone, the way he looked at me. It wasn't like the usual way a dog looks at its owner. There was something deeper, something almost human in those eyes. As the months passed, Charlie became more than just a companion. I'd wake up every morning to find him curled up on the edge of the bed, the place where Tom used to sleep now occupied by my dog. I didn't mind, of course. In fact, it became something I looked forward to. That warm body next to mine, breathing softly in the night, made me feel less alone. But it wasn't just his warmth that made me feel different. It was the way he began to follow me everywhere, like a shadow. But more than that, he began to watch me with an intensity that at first made me uneasy. Whenever I moved, his eyes were on me, always waiting, always expectant. It wasn't long before I began to feel a strange connection growing between us, something I couldn't quite explain. There was one evening, however, that stands out more than the others. It was late and the house was quiet. I had finished my tea and was heading for bed when Charlie trotted into the bedroom behind me, as he often did. But this time, instead of sitting at the foot of the bed, he sat down next to me on the mattress. His big, dark eyes bored into mine. I felt a strange flutter in my chest. "Charlie, what are you doing?" I asked, laughing softly to break the tension I suddenly felt. But he didn't move. He just sat there, staring. And something about the way he looked at me, his eyes filled with a certain longing, made me freeze. I felt my heart race, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I knew it was ridiculous, but there was a moment, a brief moment, when I could have sworn I saw something in him, something beyond what was normal for a dog. As if sensing the confusion in my head, Charlie nudged closer and rested his head on my thigh. His tail wagged gently, but the moment was charged with something I didn't understand. I reached down to stroke him, my fingers trembling slightly, and then I felt it, a warmth, a connection, something I hadn't felt in years. Not since Tom. From that night on, things only got stranger. Charlie became even more attached, always finding ways to be near me. I couldn't move without him being there, watching, waiting. He began to sit closer during our nights on the couch, his body pressed against mine in a way that felt more intimate than it should. It was comforting, yes, but there was something else, something unsettling that I couldn't admit to myself at first. I remember waking up one night, the moonlight casting shadows across the room. I turned over in bed, and there he was, Charlie, lying right next to me, his face so close I could feel his breath. I should have been frightened, but I wasn't. Instead, a wave of warmth washed over me. I reached out to stroke his fur, and he responded by nuzzling me closer. In that moment, half asleep and vulnerable, I felt it. The undeniable realization that my bond with him had become something deeper, something I couldn't easily explain. I tried to shake the thought from my mind, telling myself it was just loneliness playing tricks on me. After all, I was an old woman who had lost the love of her life. Was it so wrong to seek comfort, even from a dog? But the feelings only grew stronger. Charlie seemed to sense them too. He followed me everywhere, always by my side, and those eyes of his, they never left me. It was as if we were two beings drawn together by some unseen force, something beyond the normal boundaries of companionship. It was strange, but I couldn't deny it any longer. I needed him more than I cared to admit. Then came the night that changed everything. I was restless, unable to sleep. My thoughts were a whirlwind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building between us. I went downstairs, hoping a glass of water would calm my nerves, but when I returned to the bedroom, Charlie was already there. He was on my side of the bed. He didn't move when I approached, didn't even blink. He just stared at me, waiting, as if he had been expecting me. I climbed into bed hesitantly at first, but once I was under the covers, Charlie moved closer. His body pressed against mine in a way that felt so intimate. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't push him away. Instead, I let him stay, his warmth seeping into me, filling the cold places in my heart that had been empty for so long. I should have been ashamed, but I wasn't. In that moment, lying there with Charlie beside me, I felt a strange peace, a peace I hadn't felt since Tom's death. It was wrong, I knew, but it also felt right, in a way I couldn't explain. We stayed like that for a long time, just lying there in the dark, two lonely souls finding comfort in each other. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and guilt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, that what was happening between Charlie and me was more than just companionship. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself. I needed him. He had filled a void that I hadn't realized was so deep. But as the weeks went by, I began to realize that this strange emotional affair with my dog wasn't healthy. I had let my loneliness spiral out of control, and now I was caught up in something I didn't fully understand. I knew it had to stop. I had to face the truth. I was looking for something from Charlie that I should have been looking for from people, my family, my friends. It wasn't easy to admit, but the truth was staring me in the face. I had to let go of this unhealthy attachment before it consumed me completely. Charlie was a dog, a wonderful, loyal companion, but he wasn't the answer to my loneliness. He couldn't fill the space Tom had left. So slowly, I began to withdraw. I began to spend more time with Sarah and the grandchildren, reconnecting with old friends and finding ways to fill my life with the things I had once enjoyed. Charlie was still there, of course, always by my side, but I was careful to set boundaries. I had to remind myself that he was just a dog, my dog, but not my partner. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to let loneliness take you to strange, unexpected places. I'd let my grief cloud my judgment, and I'd formed an attachment that wasn't healthy. But eventually, I found my way back. I learned to lean on the people who loved me, and most importantly, I learned that no matter how much I loved Charlie, he could never replace the connections I needed with others. So here I am, sitting in my quiet home with Charlie at my feet, as he always is. I wish I could say that everything went back to normal after I made the decision to pull back, to set boundaries with Charlie. But the truth is that it has been a slow and difficult process. There were moments when I questioned myself, when the quiet evenings felt too overwhelming, and I found myself leaning on Charlie's familiar presence. Old habits die hard, as they say. But every day I reminded myself that it wasn't healthy, that it wasn't fair to me or to Charlie. He was a dog, a creature who gave unconditional love, but he wasn't a substitute for the human connection I desperately needed. I found myself seeking more human interaction. My daughter Sarah was the first to notice the change. "Mum, you've been coming over more often lately," she said one afternoon when I dropped in for tea. There was a warmth in her voice that I hadn't heard in a long time, and I realized that my withdrawal from people had made them feel the distance too. I don't want to be alone so much," I admitted, not quite ready to tell her the full extent of my strange relationship with Charlie. How could I? I was embarrassed, and Sarah had always been practical, the kind of person who would never understand how deep my loneliness had gone. "Well, we're always here for you, Mum. You know that," she said with a smile. Her words were comforting, but there was also a pang of regret in my chest. Why hadn't I come to her before? Why had I allowed my grief and isolation to push me into such a strange emotional bond with a dog instead of my own family? As time went on, I made more of an effort to reconnect with the world outside my small home. I joined a book club at the local library, something I hadn't done for years. At first, it was difficult to sit there and chat with the other women. They all talked about their children and grandchildren, their busy lives full of people. I felt out of place, as if my years of solitude had made me forget how to connect with others. But gradually I found myself enjoying their company. We discussed novels over cups of tea, laughing at plot twists and characters that reminded us of people we knew. It felt good to laugh again, to feel the lightness in my chest that had been missing for so long. Through it all, Charlie remained my constant companion, but I was more aware of the boundaries I needed to maintain. I no longer let him sleep in my bed, a habit I had come to rely on during my darkest days. Instead, I would give him a gentle pat on the head before bedtime, and he would settle into his own cozy bed at my feet. At first, it was hard to resist the urge to hold him and let his warmth comfort me as it had before, but I knew I had to stand firm. As the months passed, I began to notice a change in myself. I was no longer consumed by the overwhelming loneliness that had driven me to seek solace in Charlie. My heart still ached for Tom, and I suspected it always would, but I was beginning to accept that grief and loneliness were part of life. But they didn't define me. I had people who cared, people I could turn to. And I had Charlie, but I now understood that his love, though unconditional, was different from what I needed. It was on a crisp autumn day, about a year after that strange turning point with Charlie, that I finally felt I had come full circle. I was walking in the park, Charlie trotting happily beside me, the leaves crunching under our feet. The air was cool and the smell of pine filled the breeze. As I looked around, I saw other people walking their dogs, some laughing and chatting with friends. It struck me how easy it could be to just enjoy the moment, the company of others, human and animal alike. Charlie stopped to sniff a fallen leaf, his tail wagging contentedly, and I smiled down at him. "You've been a good dog, haven't you?" I said quietly, scratching his ears. He looked up at me, those big brown eyes filled with the same love and loyalty he had always shown. But now I saw it for what it was, pure, simple, and unconditional, not something to fill the void that human relationships should fill. In the months that followed, I found myself opening up more and more. I let my family in, told them about the struggles I had faced, the loneliness that had consumed me after Tom's death. I even told Sarah, in a roundabout way, how much I had come to rely on Charlie. She listened quietly, her face filled with understanding. And when I finished, she gave me a big hug. "You don't have to go through this alone, Mum," she said, her voice soft. "We're always here." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. I didn't have to do this alone. I had people who loved me, who wanted to help me through my grief. And although Charlie had been an important part of that journey, I now understood that he couldn't be my everything. He was my dog, my loyal companion, but I had to learn to lean on the people in my life again. Looking back, I realized how easy it is to let loneliness take you to strange places, to create attachments that don't make sense to anyone else. But in the end, it's the human connections, the love and support of family and friends that really make the difference. Charlie will always be a special part of my life, but now I'm learning to embrace the world outside my quiet home again. And as I sit here now, with Charlie curled up at my feet, I feel at peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from escaping loneliness through strange attachments, but the kind that comes from facing your feelings and reconnecting with the people who matter most. After all, it's the love we share with others that truly heals us, not the fleeting comfort of solitude or the affection of a dog, however loyal.